Hello everyone, I am Nicole Anjanati Pontanilla from Bachelor of Secondary Education, major in English. And today I will discuss the psychoanalytic theory and psychological criticism of Sigmund Freud. But first, let us know who is Sigmund Freud. So, Sigmund Freud is the founder of psychoanalysis and psychoanalytic theory. Sigmund Freud was born on May 6, 1856 in Freiburg town, Czech Republic. Sigmund Freud graduated in 1881 from the Medical Faculty, University of Vienna. In 1896, when Sigmund Freud was officially recognized. And in 1900, Sigmund Freud released The Interpretation of Dreams. And on September 23, 1939, sadly, Freud passed away in Hampstead House. Now, let's have an overview of psychoanalysis. So, psychoanalysis is a set of philosophical of human nature. Psychoanalysis is both an approach to therapy and a theory of personality. It emphasizes unconscious motivation, which means it is the main cause of behavior lie in unconscious mind. Now, let's talk about the view of human nature. So the first one is deterministic. Deterministic said that life is about gaining pleasure and avoiding pain. So this means that in life we are naturally inclined to seek things that make us happy and avoid things that cause us discomfort or harm. So it is like our instinct guiding us to choose what feels good and avoid what feels bad. Number two is the human as energy system. So here, Freud believed that humans are motivated by the unconscious, where the id is found along with the aggression and sex instincts. So, according to Freud, our minds have different parts, and one of them is called the unconscious. So, this part contains thoughts, desires, and memories that we are not aware of, but still, it influences us. So, within the unconscious, there is a part called the id, which is the id represents our basic instincts like aggression and sexual desires. So, these instincts can affect our thoughts and actions even if we don't realize it. Next is our level of mental life. So we have three levels of mental life, which are the unconscious, preconscious, and unconscious. So the first one is unconscious. Unconscious contains all the feelings, urge, or instincts that are beyond our awareness, but it affects our expression, feelings, and actions. So for example, the slip of tongue, dreams, and wishes. So for example, slip of the tongue. So when you are feeling nervous, right, and doing some interview, and then because of how you feel, you said something that is not good to hear. So that is slip of the tongue. Number two is preconscious. So preconscious are the facts stored in a part of the brain which are not conscious but are available for possible use in the future. So it means that it is kind of like a storage area in the brain where we could keep facts and information that we are not currently thinking about, but we can easily access them when needed. So for example, a person will never think of her home address at that moment, but when her friend asks for it, she can easily recall it. So that is preconscious. And lastly, conscious. So conscious is the only level of mental life that is directly available to us, is the awareness of our own mental process, so thoughts and feelings. So this is the level of mental life that we are directly aware of. It is where we have immediate access to our thoughts and feelings. So for example, when you are reading a book, being conscious means being aware of the words on the page, the thoughts that arise, and the emotions evoked by the content. So it is the level of mental life that is directly available to us. So, in simple terms, the unconscious is where our hidden feelings and instincts reside, even though we may not be aware of them. And the free conscious is like a storage area where we can keep information that we can easily retrieve when needed. And the last is conscious. It is our direct awareness of our thoughts and feelings in the present moment. So those are the three levels of mental life. Now let's move on to the structure of personality. So it consists of three parts, which are the id, ego, and superego. So the id, infants are born with id intact. The id is like the instinctual part of our personality that we are born with. Next, it operates on pleasure principle. So to gain pleasure, avoid pain. So it operates on the pleasure principle, which means it seeks immediate gratification and wants to gain pleasure while avoiding pain. Next, driven by sexual and aggressive urge. So the id is driven by our basic urge, like the desire for food, pleasure, and the need to satisfy your instincts. Next is the ego. So ego is the rational level of personality. It operates on reality principles, thus realistic and logical thinking, and the balance between id and superego. So the ego acts as a balance between the impulsive desires of the id and the moral standards of the superego. Lastly is superego. So superego is partially unconscious. It operates on moral principles. It's able to differentiate between good and bad, right and wrong. So if people follow their superego, they will feel proud, but if they don't follow, they will feel guilty and anxious. So kumbaga, ang superego is he do the right things sa kapahamakan na maaaring idulot ni id. Kasi nga, di ba si id, ito yung desire na kailangang isatisfied natin kahit merong consequences. So, kaya nandito si superego, siya yung ating protective mechanism na it guide us to make a decision that prioritize the well-being of ourselves and others. Now, let's have psychosexual stages. So, children progress through psychosexual stages during psychosexual development, which are the oral stage, anal stage, phallic stage, and genital stage. So, a person becomes fixated or stuck in a stage when a basic need is not met. So, therefore, that person will face difficulty in transiting to another stage. We also have defense mechanism. So number one is repression. It is the unpleasant experiences are stored deep in the subconscious mind and can't be accessed by the conscious mind. So repression is a way of our mind protect us from unpleasant or traumatic experiences. Repression is also the basic defense mechanism. Number two is displacement. So displacement is redirecting the feelings of hostility and violent action from self to another that is less threatening from original source. So in simple terms, displacement is when we redirect our anger or violent feelings from one person or situation to another that is less threatening. Number three is rationalization, so providing a reasonable explanation to make undesirable behavior appear logical. So rationalization is when we try to make our mistakes or bad behaviors seem more reasonable by coming up with logical explanations or excuses. And number four is denial. So reality is distorted to make it suit to the individual's wishes. So in simple terms, denial is when we ignore or reject the truth because it makes us uncomfortable or conflicts with what we want to believe. Number five is regression. So it is an act of returning to a behavior pattern characteristic of an early stage of development. So in simple terms, regression is when we go back to behaving like we did when we were younger, especially when we're feeling stressed or upset. Number six is reaction formation. It is thinking or behaving in a way that is the extreme opposite to those that are of real intention. So in simple terms, reaction formation is when we pretend to feel or desire the opposite of what we truly feel. And lastly, projection. So projection is the attribution of one's unacceptable urge or qualities to others. So in simple terms, projection is when we blame others for having qualities or feelings that we don't want to admit we have ourselves. For example, a person in an extremely bad mood accuses family members of being hard to get along with. So, when someone is in a bad mood, they may project their irritability onto their family members by accusing them of being difficult to get along with. So, it is a way of avoiding or denying our own emotions by seeing them in others instead. Next, we have therapeutic process and therapeutic techniques. So, the six basic techniques of psychoanalytic therapy are: number one, maintaining the analytic framework; two, pre-association; three, interpretation; four, dream analysis; five, analysis of resistance; and six, analysis of transference. Next, we have client's experience in therapy. So we have three types of therapy. The first one is psychoanalysis, psychodynamic, and psychoanalytic. The first one is psychoanalysis. First, client must be a voluntary client, not involuntary. So this is because the clients will have to give commitment in the process. And after a few face-to-face sessions, therapists will move on to the next stage where the client are needed to lie on a couch and engage in pre-association. So in an intensive process where client will meet up to 4 to 5 sessions per week, and in this stage, client will say whatever that comes into their mind, and the therapist will remain non-judgmental on its content throughout the whole process. And psychoanalysis attempts to help clients develop insight into deep-rooted problems that are often thought to stem from childhood. Next is psychoanalytic therapy. So this therapy engages in a more supportive intervention. The therapist takes on a caring and understanding role, and also they will provide emotional support and create a safe space for the client to share their thoughts and feelings. So psychoanalytic therapy is based upon psychoanalysis, but it is less intensive, like it is only takes 1 to 3 sessions per week. So it is for individuals who want to understand more about themselves and those who have difficulties that affected them. Clients will talk about their life and the therapist would listen. So this is known as talk therapy. The therapist will look for patterns that may have caused the client's difficulties. And also, psychoanalytic therapy is usually face-to-face session. Of course, clients are advised not to make radical changes in their lifestyle as it may disturb the therapeutic process. So, kanina sabi, therapy process take 1 to 3 session per week, right? So, if after one session, biglang may nagbago sa lifestyle mo, like for example, nag-divorce kayo ng ka-relationship mo or nag-quit ka ng job, this kind of situation is maaaring makasira or makadisrupt ng therapy process mo. Or maaaring magkaroon ng panibagong stress at hindi ka makapokus sa therapy. So those are an example of radical changes. Now we have termination. So the termination is the ending of therapeutic relationship between the therapist and the client. So it can take place when both therapist and client mutually agree that the client had, number 1, resolve the problem or the core conflict. Number 2, accepted the remaining emotional problem. Number 3, and understand the root of their difficulties. And the last type of therapy is psychodynamic therapy. So this approach evolved from the psychoanalytic theory, but it is more simplified in terms of the length of the process and focus on more immediate problems like phobia and anxiety problems. But of course, the therapy will also explore the unconscious thoughts, emotions, and past experiences that contribute sa client's current challenges. And in psychodynamic therapy, the therapist will pay more attention to transference manifestation, meaning when the patient transfer the feelings, emotions, or past experiences for others onto the therapist. So that is the meaning of client's dream. And also the transference are encouraged in psychodynamic. So this therapy includes using techniques from other sources such as Carl Jung, Otto Rank, and so on. So another one, psychodynamic therapy increases clients' awareness and understanding of how the past has influenced present thoughts and behavior by exploring their unconscious patterns. It also seeks to provide a quicker solution. It can be used in individual psychotherapy, group therapy, family therapy, institutional, and organizational contexts. So, in summary, while all three types of therapy share common theoretical foundations, psychoanalysis is the most intensive and long-term. Psychodynamic therapy is shorter and more focused. Psychoanalytic therapy falls somewhere in between. So, the specific treatment techniques and duration may vary depending on the therapist's approach and the needs of the individual client. Now, let's move on to my main topic, which is psychological criticism. Psychological criticism is a form of literary criticism that involves applying ideas from psychology to analyze literature. It explores the mind and behavior of characters and authors, seeking to understand their motivations, thoughts, and emotional reactions. So here in psychological criticism, there are two main approaches. Number 1 is focusing on the author, and number 2 is focusing on the characters within the text. When focusing on the author, psychological criticism examines how the text reveals the psychology of the author. It looks at how the author's own experiences, beliefs, and emotions are reflected in the work. This approach considers the author's background, childhood traumas, family life, and personal conflicts as influences on the characters and themes in the literary work. Alternatively, when focusing on the characters, psychological criticism delves into the minds of the characters and seeks to understand why they think and act the way they do. It also asks questions about their motivations, fears, anxieties, and personal traits. By analyzing the character thoughts, emotions, and behavior, psychoanalytical criticism aims to uncover the psychological complexities within the text. There are two main methods of conducting psychological criticism. So the first one is using psychological theories. Number two, asking psychological questions. So, if the critic is familiar with psychological theories such as Freud that I have discussed a while ago, Erikson, or Piaget, they can directly apply these theories to analyze the text. For example, they might consider how a character's behavior aligns with Freudian or Freudian concepts. But if the critic is not familiar with psychological theories, then he or she can just generally ask psychological questions to gain insight into the character's minds. So these are the examples of psychological questions. Number one, why do the characters react the way they do? 2. What causes characters to mature in the book? 3. How have the character lives and backgrounds influenced their actions? 4. What fears and nervous tics do the character have? And last one, what kind of personality do I have? Do they have any? Why? So those are the just an example psychological question that you can generally ask. So overall, psychological criticism aims to uncover the unconscious desires, anxieties, conflicts, and emotions of the author and characters within a literary work. It views the text as a reflection of the author's personal anxieties and employs psychological techniques to analyze the piece. So, by exploring the psychological aspects of literature, this form of criticism provides valuable insights into the complexities of human behavior and the motivations behind literary creations. So that ends my report about psychoanalytic theory and criticism of Sigmund Freud. I hope you guys understand some of the information that I have discussed, especially psychoanalytic criticism, wherein you can apply this on real life situations. So thank you for watching and goodbye.